Hello and welcome to Atypical Dikkatein, a conversation podcast. I'm your host Soumya, and in this podcast, I talk to fellow queer, neurodivergent, and disabled folks. Why? Because I want to. This podcast is a way for queer and disabled folks to take up space according to our own terms in a world where we face constant invisibilization. Today, I have Vignesh with me. Vignesh is a law graduate currently working at an academic research center with a focus in technology law. They are particularly interested in the impacts of various technologies on individuals and society at large. Being diagnosed with ADHD and ASD only in adulthood, they quickly gained a new special interest, which is common amongst late diagnosed autistics autism. Specifically, they are interested in how autism and ADHD interact with and influence various aspects of their life, including daily routines, pet peeves, interpersonal dynamics, and their queerness. Hi Vignesh, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Samya. Thank you for inviting me.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. One day at a time.
Yeah.
I read about you in the bio, and the first question that came to my mind was, how did you come to know that you are autistic, given how adult diagnoses are difficult to access? How was your experience navigating the system and getting the diagnosis?
Yeah. So, adult diagnosis is fairly difficult, and it's more so difficult when you have other externalities, comorbidities, or anything else that also affects the likelihood of getting a diagnosis. For example, it's much easier for a cis male boy aged about 12 to 14 years old to get an autism diagnosis if that boy doesn't have any other uh, you know uh, neurodevelopmental disorders or other types of neurodivergent anything else which is neurodivergent like ADHD or OCD. uh, so it's much more difficult once you stray away from this key demographic in quotes of the traditional understanding of autism. So yeah, it becomes more difficult if you have other things which mess with that. And for me, I have ADHD as well, which which has a lot of commonalities with autism and a lot of differences. And so they either uh, exacerbate the effects of each other or sometimes counteract certain effects of each other in both good and really bad ways, because of which it's not like a textbook autistic only diagnostic criteria. So that makes it very difficult to easily recognize it, which is why it took me a while to recognize that. Uh, in terms of how I got the diagnosis, I first got my ADHD diagnosis after I realized that I went on antidepressants and all of that, and I realized that I still was unable to do certain key things, which I later realized was executive dysfunction, which is present in both ADHD and autism. Uh, and that started like this path of research, looking at ADHD, trying to see how much of that resonates with me, talking to my therapist about it, and then getting an assessment. And then after I got that assessment, I realized that this is right. This does help me figure out a lot about how my brain works, uh, but it isn't the entire picture. And that's when I slowly, I've always known uh, about autism more than ADHD, but it's very difficult to know that you yourself are autistic when everything you know about autism is based on misconceptions and just general ideas that people have which is there in books and media and peers, teachers, parents, everybody, has one idea of what autism is. And since I saw that I didn't fit into that, I never seriously considered it that I might be autistic. And then it took me a while to unlearn a lot of that and get my assessment done.
Yeah, it's difficult to come to terms that you might be autistic because of the way it is represented. It's, portrayed in media, in books, and the popular characters that you see, and uh, even like, the way it's described in medical science. It's just difficult. I think a lot of it is also related to ableism and stigma. So what changed after the diagnosis for you?
Honestly, like everybody's experiences are different. For me, in terms of medication and all, like ADHD medication, that hasn't helped me much, or at least to the extent I would want it to. But apart from that, getting both of these diagnoses have it's significantly improved how I see myself and the amount of kindness and grace I provide to myself, and just consciously unlearning uh, a lot of negative feelings that I had towards myself and a lot of pressure that I put on myself without knowing that my brain simply cannot do these things. And so, no matter how much I got mad at myself or sad or irritated or whatever, that's not going to change the reality. I have to find alternative ways of doing certain things, or if that's not possible, I have to accept the fact that I cannot do the same things that all of my neurotypical peers can do, or even my juniors. Uh, you know, I think that's one of the key things that I've learned over the past 2 years.
Yeah, something I think someone told me recently that how someone reacts to you when you do your ND things, your autistic things, it's a reflection on them, not you, because these things come naturally to you. So the thing that you mentioned about extending myself some grace and kindness and compassion, that has definitely improved for me as well. I still have a long way to go, but that's something, like, I'm more kinder towards myself. I don't end up self blaming myself all that much that I used to once upon a time. So completely relate on that. And people have all these stereotypes about what an autistic person should look like. um, can you tell us more about autism from the inside? I often get questions, what are the do's and don'ts when you interact with an autistic person, and it varies to person. Every individual is different. Different. It's said that if you have met one autistic person, you have met just one autistic person. So, could you shed some more light about these stereotypes, and what does autism look like from the inside?
Yeah, I'll start with my understanding of, you know, uh, how I used to see autism being discussed or represented or perceived by everybody around me, TV shows, books, movies, you know, throughout, like from childhood itself versus how I see it now. Uh, it's always seen as uh, from the outside, it's seen as some sort of a hindrance, some sort of a an irrational kind of behavior which is unjustified and illogical. uh, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I never thought I was autistic. That and the constant you know uh, reiteration of autistic people aren't funny, or they don't understand jokes, and they don't understand sarcasm and things like that. Whereas me, from a very young age, I've always been this, you know uh, making jokes, making puns, and being sarcastic, that kind of a person. And like everybody knows me as that. And that was, funnily enough, the biggest reason why I never thought I was autistic, because I was like, okay, everything else is fine, diagnostic criteria and all fine, but like, I can make people laugh. How can I be autistic? Uh, so that's like one massive thing in terms of how it's seen from the outside. It's also seen, you know, if you go a bit further, like uh, more than just a high school understanding. From the outside, it's seen as a very static thing, and it's seen as a very binary definition, that there are high functioning autistics and low functioning autistic, and you are either you're either in the former or the latter. Whereas, after realizing I was autistic, reading into it, and getting my diagnosis, I've realized that it's called autism spectrum for a reason. It's not a linear graph. It's not, on a line you can place your uh, traits in autism. It's a spectrum, like a color wheel, where different for different issues you are on different levels, and based on different circumstances you may be high functioning or low functioning, and even those labels are very counterintuitive. uh, so yeah, I think, I mean, this is not like a professional definition and all of that, but it's pretty much that, in terms of my understanding, that you can't place somebody on a linear graph, that okay, this is where they are in terms of functionality or support needs and all of that. Like, depending on various factors, everyone who's autistic will have different support needs, as opposed to how uh, they were like one day before, one day later, things like that also.
Yeah, it's a very spiky profile, no? The many, many online tests that are there, which I'm sure you also must have like researched. Researching itself about, autism, it's such an autistic thing, right? Making your own notes and everything. And yeah, it's a spiky profile. Someone might be good at communication, and someone might not be good at making eye contact. It's a spiky profile. Someone might be very talented, and that's everyone has an individual way of interacting with the world, right? Which is something that's missed. And like you said, these whole labels, high functioning and low functioning, I think there are days when, even when like outsiders will tell me that you are high functioning, there are days when I'm low functioning. I can't do the bare minimum. I can't even, my executive functioning goes so haywire that I can't do basic things, because in order to do that one thing, I have to first figure out like 10 other mini things in order to be able to do that thing. So yeah, that's there. And because of these stereotypes and misconceptions, we also like start blaming ourselves, especially the undiagnosed ones. And it's like another journey you have to take in order to overcome all that internalized ableism. So could you share something along those lines, like how stereotypes and misconceptions affect the way autistics, especially the undiagnosed autistics, see themselves?
Yeah, I think one of the, pretty much a universal experience for autistic people, both diagnosed and undiagnosed, is uh, having this vibe, or being explicitly told also by people they interact with throughout childhood and adulthood in varying capacities, that they are weird, or words akin to weird, uh, and like always like seeing that as okay, cool, something's off about me, or I'm not fitting in with uh, how everyone is supposed to behave, or something like that. uh, that's one of the universal experiences, and a lot of people, especially after uh, being diagnosed, uh, they talk about how in any interaction with somebody who doesn't know that they're autistic, where they start off by saying, "Oh my God, you're so weird," uh, and they say, "Actually, I'm autistic." The person who called them weird would immediately go, "Wait, but you don't seem autistic. You just seem kind of weird," or like something like that, because even in their head they subconsciously know that the autistic person is not following all of the cues or norms, or is somehow breaking the quote unquote rules. uh, but they can't put their finger on it. They just know that this person is not acting the way that most other people would, and have to be cognizant of that. But they can't identify that discomfort or irregularity in quotes with their idea of what is an autistic person. And that's because of misconceptions, uh, and stereotypes, and all of these ideas of what an autistic person should look like, which gets in the way of recognizing that. I think that's one level of it. uh, Another would be that, especially when a neurodevelopmental disorders or disabilities are invisible, uh, it becomes even more difficult for an able-bodied person, an allistic person, a neurotypical person to empathize with that, or even understand the extent of impact of that disability, or that difference. And I think that's one of the bigger ones, uh, which prevents people from recognizing your needs as valid, or recognizing you as an autistic person, or taking you seriously for that, because they have that binary picture of what an autistic person should look like. And it's Sam from Atypical, or the protagonist from Rain Man, or whatever, American media usually uh, has shown for decades.
This is so true. Oh my God. Lifetime of labels. I've been told I'm unapproachable, rude, angry. Oh my God, you're so perfectionist, Soumya. And I realized something, that when I'm masking, which is when I'm people pleasing, doing things in order to make others happy, that's okay. When I start being myself, you know, start doing things my own way, when I'm, struggling to survive, and that's when like my ND, characters, they kind of, uh, they are at the forefront. That's when people say that, all these labels come in. And over time I've just realized that people somehow want to make me less ND. Like, how do I fit into the neurotypical world? But yeah, and when I, like, recently, as I've like embraced my neurodivergence, one of the other things that I also hear is like, you are more autistic. The difference is that I was autistic. I was masking in order to please others, make others comfortable. And now I'm just doing things which come naturally to me, and suddenly I seem more autistic to them. So, yeah. And because of not understanding social cues, sarcasm, even rhetorical questions, sometimes I feel so silly because people would ask me rhetorical questions and I will legit answer them. And then it feels like when they tell me it was a rhetorical question, I just feel silly. So I've had like a lifetime of incidents when it comes to these miscommunications which happen between allistic and autistic people because of the difference between the communication styles. So that's like it's become a huge trigger for me now when somebody misunderstands me or attaches negative intentions to what I'm saying. So I know it's related to the double empathy problem, but yeah, would you like to explain it to our listeners about the difference between allistic and autistic communication styles? What is the double empathy problem?
Yeah, so basically, a lot of research into actually understanding autism or ADHD or most of these, anything which is a neurodivergent person. Like most of these things are, the research is like fairly new compared to when the earliest diagnostic criteria was framed. And that's because for the longest time, like even now, uh, the basis for diagnosing somebody in a professional capacity for autism or ADHD or anything else, it's tied to how much discomfort or uh, you know rift or any other sort of impact is faced by the people around the neurodivergent person. So, how much struggles or issues or anything is faced by your family because you're autistic or your family because you're ADHD? That's that sort of a perception has made it very easy to term neurodivergence as strictly a disorder, and that neurotypicals are the norm and their brains are balanced in terms of function, whereas any changes in the way that a brain functions is a disorder. That sort of assumption makes it very difficult to actually understand what's the issue at hand. The double empathy problem study kind of brings light into this. Basically, what they did was the researchers played a game of telephone, or made the participants play a game of telephone, which is where you whisper a message to the next person and it goes in a circle and then you compare the first message to the final message. When the participants were a mix of neurotypical people as well as autistic people, there was a lot of miscommunication involved by the end. But what the researchers found was that when the same game was played with participants who are all neurotypical and participants who are all autistic, both of these groups had very high success rates and very similar success rates as well. So the issue isn't that an autistic person lacks communication skills or adequate communication and social skills. It's that the method for communication and socialization uh, amongst autistics is more similar to each other, uh, and it's more different than the uh, dominant form of socialization and communication amongst neurotypicals. So it's not that this is always a disorder or a deficiency in the neurodivergent person. It's that there is a significant difference in the way that we function. And I mean, difference is there everywhere in nature. You have to embrace it, and that's the only way in which uh, we see a lot of benefits in society. So I think that's what we have to accept or understand in terms of how we see people who are different from us in almost all aspects.
This is so true, like autism is diagnosed when the person, the individual, is being disruptive for others. You are locating the problem within the individual, not taking into account the environment which is stressing the individual. And again, that is the problem with the biomedical model, right? Like the disorder, quote unquote. um, the burden is placed on the individual. Everyone wants to correct the individual, make them less autistic or less, hyperactive, whatever that is. And like when it's invisible, it's non-visible to the other person, people don't even validate these experiences. Like um, the pain that we experience, some people would just brush it off by saying, okay, you're experiencing discomfort. um, like sometimes when people tell me to sit with the discomfort, I'm like, it's like my limbs are being taken away and then people are asking me to walk. That is how it is while dealing with uncertainty. And it's the pain is unimaginable, mental, emotional, and I'm just stuck. I'm literally stuck. Even if I have a meeting and my entire focus will be on that, like I need to complete that meeting and I won't be able to do anything else. So that's how it is painful, but people don't validate it or believe it, especially when it's a non-visible to them. And everybody talks about accommodations, like um, but like when you go and tell them like this is what will help us, a routine will help us, or keeping things ordered, sane, that will help us in order to have some semblance of certainty in this uncertain world. Even that is like difficult to get, because people, again, they don't validate our experiences and don't believe when we say we are in pain or this is causing us distress. So how do we understand accommodations and adapt to them for ourselves, and how do we also explain it to others when they're not even like unable to grasp what's it like to be neurodivergent, what's it like to be autistic?
Yeah, like your experiences and like the way you capture that, like that's very true. Uh, to answer the question on accommodations, I'd like to go back to one thing which you said earlier, which is people noting that you've become more autistic since your diagnosis recently. So I think that kind of relates to a bit of it, where friends of autistic friends of mine who were diagnosed much later than me, or who I played at least a minor role in understanding that, hey, the problem isn't me, or I should go for a diagnosis or something like that. Both autistic and ADHD friends of mine, come up with just they tell me like random things that they do, or this is what I do sometimes, like out of context, and I will give them a label for it by saying, oh yeah, this is rejection sensitive disorder, or this is emotion dysregulation, or this is echolalia, or something like that, which relates to ADHD or autism. And they're like, wait, you're telling me that this thing that I've been doing for 20 years is because I'm autistic, or is because I have ADHD? And I didn't even know about this, and I used to be ashamed of it, or I used to suppress it and things like that. I'm like, yeah, and now you know that this is what it's called. Well, once you name the problem, once you're able to identify it, it becomes easier to first see if it is a problem or not. And if it is a problem which is not solved, you will know better ways to solve it. uh, I think that's the one of the biggest reasons why people will tell you, "Oh, you seem more autistic now." That's because you just lived with, like, we just lived with this vague discomfort throughout our lives that we couldn't point at. And after getting these diagnoses, we're like on the path to at least figuring them out, and so now you're trying to ease this discomfort that was always there. uh, I think that would be a good, if not long, a good way to start understanding accommodations, like in terms of needing noise cancelling headphones because of sensory sensitivities, needing to wear glasses, like, sunglasses or other tinted glasses, both outdoors and indoors, because of the same, requiring clear directions and explicit communication. A lot of these things we didn't know, and we had a vague discomfort with it, or we, would have maladaptive coping mechanisms to deal with them. But now that we know the source of this discomfort, we can uh, make it easier for ourselves. And if it's something which requires somebody else's help, either as a person or an institution, without that help, uh, nothing can be done. So I think that's how you look at accommodations. It's just trying to understand what you need, and whether that's something that you can provide yourself, or whether that's something which requires others to provide something for you.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And the thing that you said about, accommodations, this also brought something to my mind. Like, I had trouble figuring out analog watches as a kid for a very long time, and I was only comfortable with digital watches. But over time, like, I learned it. And similar with, driving also. Um, uh, it's very difficult for me to remember directions, and my dad would get kind of mad with me because I can't remember directions. And even when I was in undergrad, I just took the same route every single day for 3 years, no other, the same single route. And once college was over, undergrad was over, I stopped driving. I was driving a scooty. I just learned it so I could go to college, and then I stopped because I'm terrified, um, because the perception of like direction, distance, it's kind of difficult for me. I can't um, properly, uh, gauge if I'm doing it right or wrong. It's just difficult. Even it's difficult to articulate it, like what goes on in my head. So it kind of like brought me shame, because people would share that they are driving, they're learning to drive, this, that, and I couldn't keep up. Even when my dad would like offer me to, I'll teach you, and I'd be reluctant to do it. But then when I came to know, okay, this is something that many autistics, many neurodivergent people experience, it kind of helped me. Like, I stopped blaming myself, shaming myself for not being able to do certain things. And that is also sort of an accommodation for me. And I think you briefly mentioned RSD. So one of the things that I kind of like have a little bit of problem with is like, yeah, like our entire lives people will reject us in some form or the other. And of course we will develop this sensitivity towards rejection, because you never fit in. One of the things that I have heard from all autistics is that you never fit in. No matter how much you try, you just feel like an alien amongst people. And that's been like one common story for every autistic person that I have met till date. And to use that even like as a disorder, that this is a disorder in you when constantly you are otherized, that also doesn't kind of like sit well with me. But yeah, could you tell us more about your thoughts on RST and emotional dysregulation? So just like if you could explain it to us, what's it like?
Yeah. So again, like, uh, all of this varies between people, uh, even amongst people with ADHD or autistic people. It's either heightened or lower, uh, and so there is no way to have a, a uniform or a universal understanding of it. So even when it comes to sensory needs, a lot of autistic people are sensory averse, which is that they don't like a lot of too much sensory information, whereas some people are sensory seeking. So you have a lot of autistic people who also love going to raves and nightclubs because they love that amount of sensory information, whereas I would never do that because we are on the opposite ends of that spectrum. And even like interoception, which is understanding the ability to understand the inner functionings of your body. So, whether or not you're hungry, whether or not you have to pee, a lot of these things, right? Whether there is a pain, describing a pain, things like that also. There are some autistic people who are really good at it, like startlingly good at it, uh, almost like a superhuman ability compared to the neurotypical extent of introspection. Whereas on the other end, you have people who will not be able to recognize that they're hungry until they're almost passing out, uh, or like that they have to pee until like it's literally you can't hold it in anymore. So there's a lot of divergence there, and the same is with regard to emotional dysregulation, which is that you have very heightened emotional responses in different situations, uh, which is quote unquote disproportional compared to what a neurotypical would do. And rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is you know having this significant anxiety around not just rejection but ambiguity and perceived rejection also. So like, if even if it's not like explicit yes, uh, and it's like, somewhat like, if there's something off with the yes also, there will be like RSD will kick in. uh, if there is no response but like it's not a no, RSD will kick in. If there is some ambiguity, RSD will kick in. If there are mixed signals, RSD will kick in. So it's like that. Uh, so yeah, it does tie a lot to this theme of uncertainty, which we discussed before when we were looking at the themes for what to talk about here, which is that like both of us face issues with significant issues with uncertainty. uh, and yeah, that's like one of the biggest things which makes it difficult in a lot of situations, whether at work, at home, with friends. Like, everybody will be like, yeah, we'll meet whenever, or let's meet sometime next week, or let's pick some random place. We'll pick a place once we get there. Things like that, where everybody is fine with a level of spontaneity, whereas you want everything to be not want but need everything to be clear before you even start the plan, because you need to know uh, how to react in those situations, or how to react to those situations, or how to adjust your schedule for that specific plan. So yeah, like, uncertainty really does affect a lot of avenues in your life.
Oh my God, it's crippling. It's crippling. I don't know how people make impromptu plans just like that. I can't. I need to know the things even before I say yes, even if I agree to do it. It's so difficult. So it's totally crippling. Uncertainty is crippling. And I know I'm fighting a lost battle that way when I'm trying to control everything, but I don't know how else to function and process things around me. And the bit that you shared about sensory sensitivities, for me, I don't like certain things, but I love some other types of touches. Like sometimes I love deep pressure hugs. I love being, under my weighted blanket. It soothes me, soothes my nervous system. But I wouldn't like it if someone unknown comes to me and tries to hug me or like touch me like that. I don't know, it's just very anxiety inducing. And It's just uncomfortable. But then if a safe person comes me and like crushes me in a hug, I would love that. So yeah, it varies person to person. And the thing that you said about, like feeling hungry or thirsty. So what happens with me is I will hyper focus. If I'm focused on something, I'll be working on that and I won't feel hunger, thirst or anything. One of the things that my mom used to tell me as a kid was that, you're not drinking enough water. It's because I'm like engrossed in something and I can't think about anything else. Same with food, until somebody like, forces me out of that hyper focus state, which is very unpleasant, to be honest. And then they remind me to do it, and only then I can do it. So yeah, relatable. We also talked a bit about, I think we talked a bit about autism, but like you mentioned initially, there are some overlapping things in between autism and ADHD. Like some cancel out each other, some amplify things. So, how do autism and ADHD interact with each other and influence various aspects of life? Like I've talked to other people about it, and identify more with the autistic traits. I haven't seen a lot of ADHD traits in me, except for one. I think I hoard a lot of tweets as bookmarks. Like, I just bookmark everything, so I will go back and look at it, but I hardly ever go back and look at them unless it's like a book list or something. So, could you tell us more about like whatever you have read up? How do these two things interact with each other?
Yeah. So I'll just go by personal experience again, because there is no universal experience for how ADHD and autism interact. For everybody who has both the conditions. Uh, for me, like one example would be, let's say, executive dysfunction. It's common with both autistic and ADHD people. Uh, in autistic people, executive dysfunction mostly comes with this uncertainty, with, if you don't know the details, you can't do anything. So if you're starting a project, you need to know everything, and you will conduct way more research than is required. You will put in way more effort than required, and until you do that and can convince yourself you can start something, you won't be able to start it. And also, it becomes very difficult for task switching. Once you're doing one thing, it is very difficult to do something else. If there is a sudden change, you will be like, paralyzed. You can't do anything about it. You will have to sit and process it. There's no way you can do that. And that's like one example of how executive dysfunction plays a role in autism. Whereas in ADHD, executive dysfunction is more like you can't even get things started because you're already exhausted just by thinking about doing something. So, like, you can't fold your clothes because it's too exhausting. You can't do your dishes because it's too exhausting. But, like, once you actually start, it becomes much easier. So, like in one end you have difficulty in switching between tasks, and the other end you have difficulty in starting tasks. And if you have both of these, it's a nightmare. If you have to do multiple things in your life, which everybody does. So that's one. Another thing on like, how ADHD and autism interact with each other is like, autistic people need everything to be a specific way. There is a right way and a wrong way in doing things. This is like, I'm generalizing again. uh, but like, yeah, the way I fold my clothes has to be a particular way. The way I do my dishes has to be a particular way. Everything has a structure, everything has a routine. If there is a routine, I can function. That's the way autism works. Whereas the way ADHD works is that I will never be able to stick to a routine. Like, one bad day and my routine collapses. And I'm too tired, like I will leave my uh, laundry on the bed instead of taking a few minutes to fold them and put them in the cupboard. But it'll piss me off if I, me being autistic and having ADHD. It's like the meme of there are two wolves inside you. Yeah, there are two wolves inside me, and sometimes they team up for good, sometimes they team up for evil, sometimes they fight each other, and nothing gets done.
Oh my God, this bit is relatable. Like, one wrong thing and my entire day goes to drain. It's just like, oh my God, my world is like collapsing and I can't do anything. That's how it is for me. Like, just one wrong thing, according to me, like, it might not be even wrong per se, but like, it's not how I have planned things or the way I do things, and the entire day will just go to the drain. And what you mentioned about task switching, it's so painful. Recently I came across this graphic of tendril theory, how when many autistic people or neurodivergent people are hyper focused on something, there are like tendrils from your head, sort of like portraying how hyper focused you are, and when somebody yanks you away to do another task, it's painful. It's like uh, these tendrils are being ripped apart, and that's how painful it is. Like, not too long ago, I was doing some work. This is when I was doing full time work. I was doing some task, and my dad wanted some signature for some bank papers because he had to take them to the bank and he wanted them urgently. I couldn't switch and I had a meltdown. Like, that's how painful it is. And when a meltdown happens, you just feel this intense burst of energy. You can't do anything, you just feel stuck and unable to move, but you need to move your limbs also. It's a very, like, you want to move but you can't move. It's that kind of thing. And then some people cry. um, some people then like go into shutdown, like I put my earbuds and then listen to loud music in order to come out of that. Like, I implode internally. Before I used to have like external meltdowns, but now that I know, that's how I implode internally, and it's painful. And it's just difficult to articulate and explain it to people sometimes. And yeah, so researching, reading up about other autistics, other neurodivergent people, that kind of helped me. And have you noticed, like, researching is such an ND thing, right? Such an autistic thing. Like, you do your own research, you are so engrossed in these topics, preparing your own binder and everything. I think every time I talk to an autistic person, this is another thing that comes up, like research, like figuring things out on our own. So yeah, it's very relatable. And we talked a bit about like a lot about neurodivergence actually. And for me, I identify as neuroqueer, so the relationship between gender, sexuality, queerness, and neurodivergence, it's neuroqueer for me, deeply intertwined with each other. I just can't separate it. I know I started my journey with asexuality, but slowly after reading, researching, finding relatable people, stories, like, now I can't just like segregate them from one another. So, like, in your experience, is there a relationship between neurodivergence and queerness? How does neurodivergence influence queerness, if at all?
Yeah, like, I mean, every part of your life, everything that makes you you, regardless of who you are, uh, every aspect of your life impacts in some small or big ways other aspects of your life. Uh, and that's true for almost every like something like being left-handed versus being right-handed, being ambidextrous, uh, all of that impact the way that you interact with the world. And so it is fairly like intuitive that the way your mind perceives patterns, the way you think, the way you understand certain things, the way you understand the world, process the world, uh, your basis for seeing something as right or wrong, all of that does impact the way that you interact with the world. So it does impact your politics, your careers, your the way that you perceive yourself, which also includes gender and sexuality. And so it is intuitive to see that sort of a link between neurodivergence, it's specifically autism, uh, and queerness, because, like, both internally and externally, it is seen as a disruption, both by, it's defined in that way, right? It's seen as intentionally breaking rules which have existed in society for a long time, uh, and just going by what works for that individual person, as opposed to playing a part which everybody else plays in their lives, like, getting married, having kids, settling down and retiring. So, like, even in that way, it's that, like, that uh, link cannot be ignored with an autistic person having a discomfort with uh, social norms which don't make sense. It's not that we don't understand a lot of these norms, it's that we do, uh, like, get that you are following this norm. We don't understand why you're following it, we don't understand the logic behind it. And sometimes, or a lot of times, we see them as baseless, uh, which is why we choose not to follow them, a- and stop masking. And that same principle applies both in terms of the way we behave, the way we talk or the way we interact after we stop masking, and also the way that we perceive ourselves, and whether or not we're okay with the role that we've been provided by uh, society or parents or anything like that to play. That you have to dress a particular way, you have to look a particular way, you have to act a particular way, you have to think about yourself in a particular way, and all of that, right? That there is a binary there as well. So it is fairly intuitive to see that link between the two. And yeah, as somebody who experiences the world this way, I can't seem to separate these two aspects. It does reach into every aspect of my life, my interactions, and so you can't separate that link.
Yeah, it's the same for me when it comes to social hierarchies. They make absolutely, like, I understand why they exist, but I just don't understand why you are following them. To me, everyone is just another person. The titles, or the positions, like, you're just another human, and it's very difficult for me um to, like, follow these rules, these norms. And I remember I used to ask a lot of questions when I was in school. So I was like a good student, quote unquote, but yeah, I used to ask a lot of questions. And this one time, one of my teachers told me that you are adamant, because if you tell me to do something, I will not do it unless you explain it to me why this should be done. Just because somebody has told me to do something based on their authority or the social position they are in, I won't do it. So yeah, it just doesn't, like, make sense. Like, I know why they exist for you, but to me, unless you explain something to me, it won't make sense. And as a neuroqueer person, even stimming for me is queer. Like, how I rock back and forth when I'm trying to soothe myself or listen better. That's just my way of regulating myself in an unknown environment. And even in a known environment, it just helps me listen better, focus better. Even that is queer for me. I know others won't agree with it, but yeah, that's my understanding of it actually. So yeah, it's relatable. Like, this conversation has been so validating, and like, part of why I started this, it's getting fulfilled. So I'm happy about it. Any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with us, Vignesh?
Yeah, I just want to end on the same thing that you said, which is like, in my mind, when other people have some sort of a discomfort or a negative reaction to me wearing earphones or me stimming in public, or anything like that, where uh, 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 I'm breaking those social norms on how to behave in a public space, that reaction from them, I don't see it as any different from the similar reaction I get when somebody sees my hair, or the way I dress, or the way I talk, or the way I present myself, or my nails, or anything like that, right? So uh, in a similar way, that I'm breaking a social norm just by existing or being comfortable with myself. So yeah, it's very difficult to see how those are not connected to each other, and so that's how I also see that in a very similar way that you do. Uh, I think I'll end on that. Otherwise, I'll keep going for another 3 hours.
I know, right? I mean, most of my guests who have been like acquaintances or friends, it's the same thing. Like, these are the conversations that we have been having in private for so long, and like in different contexts, and now we're just sitting and talking about it and recording it. So yeah, we could just go on these topics about hours, because I hardly get to talk about these things, and I know both of us have these. This is a special interest, right? So I totally get it. But yeah, thank you so much for taking out the time to have this conversation with me. I just hope more and more people hold this space to listen to these stories and experiences and try to understand a little bit. I mean, that's all we need. Like, that was why I started this podcast actually. So thank you so much. um, if you are hearing this message, you have listened to the entire episode. So thank you so much for sticking around. If you enjoyed the episode and would like to support it, do consider sharing it with others, giving a shout out on social media, or leaving us a review. You can listen to Atypical Dikkate on Spotify. And if you want to reach out to me, your host, Soumya, check out the Linktree link in the description. See ya!